It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Monday, July 7th, 2025, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 348 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction, and I would suspect that we're going to be joined by several sets of new ears via download over the next few weeks, as the podcast awards are now live. Two Nerds in a Pod, a video game podcast, is nominated once again in the games and hobbies and in the best black hosted podcast section. So please go there and vote. And Mac, what's new with you?
Oh, not much, dude. Just another weekend, except for perhaps one of the most heartwarming things possible. I had nephews over the weekend.
Wow.
For, of course, fireworks and things like that. It was 4th of July. At some point, one of them points to my Nintendo entertainment system below the television and is just like, hey, what games do you have for that? And I was like, I've got all the games. Do you want to see one of my favorites? One's 8, the other is 12. And I turned them loose on one of my favorites, and they basically spent most of their free time the whole weekend trying to get through some Nintendo hard-style old-school games.
I mean, what game was it? You can't say one of your favorites and not tell us what it was. What game was it?
It was Mega Man 2, of course, Mr. Nice Guy.
I figured.
The first game I owned, and also still one of my favorites of all time. And they did, by the end of the weekend, manage to defeat Dr. Wily with a little bit of help from their Uncle Mac, who helped them through some of the tougher bits.
Maybe a little bit of help from save states as well, I would guess. Am I wrong there, or am I right there?
Well, I don't know how you would save state on a Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh, well, so I forget that's a game you actually probably own, but you said something about I own all the games, and you turned them loose. So when you say all the games, I only assumed that maybe there were some non-physical games being played. That was my assumption.
They were all physical in the sense that I do have a flash cartridge for the entire library. But you are right. I do have physical copies of games like Mega Man 2, Final Fantasy, and several other fantastic ones.
Nice. Well, Mac, not a lot to share that's new here. Did have a really, really good holiday weekend. Just did the usual dad stuff. Smoked some meat, went swimming with the family, fireworks, ice cream, parade, all that type of stuff. And then took today off and did a bunch of adulting stuff. Like, it's interesting. If I, 15 years ago, could see the person that I am today, I'd probably be very proud. I've beaten some really good games. Mm-hmm. Mac, you and I are podcast award winners.
Yeah.
Several years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I spent the day doing adult stuff. And so if I saw that version of me 15 years ago, I might kind of roll my eyes. I got my service done on my car. I bought some mulch for my yard.
Mm-hmm.
We did a little bit of exterior touch-up on the paint of the house.
That is some satisfying stuff right there.
Well, and then to reward myself, I went to the driving range and hit a bucket of golf balls, which, fun, but very, very adult, middle-aged type of stuff. So, to keep my youth going, Mac, I think we should do something that we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Let's do something that our inner childs will appreciate and talk about video games.
Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for being here. Episode 348 of Two Nerds in a Pod is a go, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, this first news story comes from Polygon.com, written by Patricia Hernandez. Here's what Patricia writes. Microsoft's Game Pass subscription is likely the best deal around. For a fraction of the price of a full game, you get access to hundreds of titles every month, some of which are brand new. But when video games cost millions to make and news of studio layoffs are constant, you don't need to look at an Xbox balance sheet to know the numbers aren't adding up for a service where the introductory price is a mere $1. The dissonance is at the heart of a recent discussion on social media site X, where Rafael Colantonio, founder of Arcane Studios, for those who don't know, they made Dishonored and several other great games, has spent the last few days breaking down why the service is arguably doing more harm than good. Here's a quote, Mac, and then I want to hear if you agree or disagree with him. Quote, I think Game Pass is an unsustainable model and has been increasingly damaging the industry for a decade, subsidized by Microsoft's infinite money, but at some point reality has to hit. Colantonio said in a reply to a post from a follower. The quote continues, I don't think that GP, meaning Game Pass, can coexist with other models. They'll either kill everyone else or give up. If you want some numbers, Mac, there's a quote here, or rather
I do love numbers.
Well, there's not a quote, but there's a statistic here. It says, according to a Bloomberg report in 2024, Microsoft spends $1 billion a year to get third-party games on its subscription service. That's in addition to the billions the console maker has spent acquiring marquee studios like Bethesda Softworks and Activision Blizzard. Game Pass, subscription service that gives you access to games but no ownership, harming the industry, hurting or helping the industry. What do you think?
Well,
Somewhere in between.
Maybe somewhere in between. Who knows? It's tough to tell without details. And you and I, we've talked over the years that Game Pass has existed, and we've been podcasting that we would really love to know what sort of compensation studios get. It is objectively true that Microsoft has as near to an infinite money glitch as possible when it comes to them just being able to shovel money into things like this. I don't think there is... I don't know, Mr. Nice Guy. Do you think there is anybody who believes that Game Pass is a sustainable model?
Microsoft, yeah. You mean outside of Microsoft?
Yeah, outside
That
of Microsoft.
believes that? Yeah, I think probably the people who only play on Game Pass would probably think it's a sustainable model because it benefits them immensely. They don't have to go out and spend $60 to $80 for a game. They can try a bunch of new games that they otherwise might not try. And by the way, to me, that is the main argument for how Game Pass is helping the industry, is that a lot of games that others would probably pass over probably get some more attention because they're out there and someone says, hey, this looks interesting, I'm going to try it, and it's just part of the subscription. But I get what the implication here.
Yeah.
How can you have a subscription service that takes away direct purchases of games from studios and then in the same breath have these studios shutting down? Perhaps if Game Pass didn't exist, we're spending $60 to $80 on these games and that money is going to the studio. I think that's the underlying argument here.
I suppose so. I mean, one of the things that's also a bit of a disconnect is, again, we don't have the numbers. Microsoft has not shared with us the numbers of what they're paying the studios. I assume they're getting something. We know they're getting something. Maybe it is a sustainable model for Microsoft, but maybe it's just not a sustainable model for everybody else, like you were saying, Mr. Nice Guy. I think that's entirely possible. Recently, Phil Spencer, just before they did a whole bunch of layoffs, had said something on the order of that they were posting the biggest profits that they've ever had, the largest amounts of game players by every conceivable metric. Their video games division was doing incredible and doing fantastic. And so that we can make sure going forward, we're going to make sure we've got the size of teams that we need, and they cut some thousands of devs and let them loose. So even in the situation where it's just like, oh, we're doing record profits, we have record XYZ, record engagement, record everything, almost sounds like it's not even sustainable in-house for Microsoft. Again, entirely conjecture because we don't actually have real numbers, but, seems like red flags. Your initial question of, agree, disagree with, with what this guy's saying. It seems a lot like there's a lot of evidence to support what he's saying. So I think I'm leaning toward the agree side.
Yeah. When people lose jobs, we have to remind ourselves. I don't have to remind myself, but sometimes people need to be reminded that these are people.
Yeah.
They are not just numbers. These are people with stories. They went to college and they studied game design, and then they landed their dream gig working at a game studio and they're using this to provide for their family, and this is the end game for them. Like, this is what they've always wanted to do. For Microsoft and for these big corporations, they are going to do what they feel is necessary to trim the fat from the industry and to increase profits and to increase profitability, right? And so when this gentleman says that Game Pass is killing the industry, and I assume he means because people are getting laid off when maybe they could be getting that money, he's right, but it's an emotional argument. Because to Microsoft, they may see it as just trimming the fat and actually preserving the industry. And it's a completely different perspective. And I would lean towards the one that puts people first in terms of the one that I agree with. But I also understand the business perspective that, hey, if you want us to be able to keep making games, you know, we're going to have to, in their mind, get rid of some of the excess. And it's crazy from a company that has quote unquote infinite money to think that, but that's just how they operate. And so I don't know that I fully agree with him, but I get where he's coming from when he says that they're killing the industry with Game Pass. I do think that from a sustainability perspective, it is absolutely sustainable. And I don't agree that they'll cannibalize everyone else because no one else has a service like this. Sony does not have a service like this. Microsoft has an online Nintendo has an online service where you get access to games that you can play via streaming and blah, 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 and Game Boy and N64 and GameCube. Great, but nothing like this. A plethora of modern day games at your fingertips for $15, $25 a month. They don't have that. So until they do, I don't think that he's right about that.
It's entirely
Could talk about this
possible.
all day.
I think it's one of those where he sees it as being the big Katamari. What was that game? Katamari.
Katamari Damacy.
Yeah, Katamari
With the ball?
Damacy. Yeah, exactly. Where it just keeps on rolling, consuming things, or it dies. I think it is fair to be concerned that maybe Game Pass is essentially the Ponzi scheme that only works so long as you still have things in your downstream feeding up. You know.
Well, dude, and here's the last thing I have to say, and then if you have other stuff to say, you can say it about this topic. It would be easy for companies, for game devs to band together and say, we don't want to be on Game Pass. But they can't do that because Microsoft owns so many of the companies of the games that are going on there. Right? They own Activision Blizzard. They own Bethesda. They own many, many others. So these people working on these games and these people in charge of these games couldn't even say, nope, we don't want to be on Game Pass. They are working for the machine that makes the decision to put these games on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Now, the smaller indie devs probably wouldn't want to do that because they're the ones who are often getting discovered as the result of being on that platform. So it's such a catch-22. I mean, it's just an interesting situation.
Yeah. The balance seems to be particularly favored toward Microsoft doing whatever they want. Damn the consequences.
I don't know about that, but hey, that's that story. Hey, we got to move on to another one, which is more up your. Well, not that wasn't up your wheelhouse, but this one's definitely in your wheelhouse. This one's on Kotaku.com, written by Ethan Gack. Here's what Ethan writes. Subnautica 2 publisher Krafton released an unusual statement last week. Unknown Worlds co-founders Ted Gill, Charlie Cleveland, and Max McGuire were being immediately removed from the studio and replaced by Striking Distance Studios Chief Development Officer Steve Papoutsis. I hope I pronounced that right. A wholesale leadership change 20 years later, right before the launch of the second most wishlisted game on Steam, fans got worried. Krafton had sought to keep the Unknown Worlds co-founders and original creators of the Subnautica series involved in the game's development, but they were leaving anyway, the studio wrote in its press release. No reason was given for why that didn't work out. Cleveland, who directed the first game, has now broken his silence, shedding some potential light on a power struggle facing one of 2025's most anticipated PC releases. Mac, I'm going to read this quote, and then I want to hear your thoughts as someone who I believe has played and enjoyed the first game. And if you think that like keeping this leadership is really going to affect the quality of the game, even though it was a late release, late firing, I should say, or late departure. Let's use the right term. Here's the quote. "We know that the game is ready for early access release, and we know you're ready to play it," he wrote on Reddit on Monday. "And while we thought this was going to be our decision to make, at least for now, the decision is in Krafton's hands. After all these years to find out I'm no longer able to work at a company I started stings." I could go on and on and on, but Mac, there's a lot of quotes here. There's a lot of things to unpack. Tell us about your journey with Subnautica, and if these names mean anything to you, if you're worried about Game 2.
So I've got to admit, the names specifically don't mean that much to me. But Subnautica, fantastic. It was the type of game that I didn't quite know I was missing. And there were several times in it where I felt like there were these lovely moments that I did not see coming, I could have never anticipated, and just the surprise and wonder behind it. I think Subnautica was a wonderful game. I am looking forward to Subnautica 2. I do feel for the guy, though, being no longer a part of the team, especially so close to there. Now, does it make me worried that these few people, right? How many people did they say are on their way out?
It sounds like 3: Ted Gill, Charlie Cleveland, and Max McGuire, the co-founders of Unknown Worlds.
Yeah, those folk don't sound familiar to me, their names specifically. The scope and size of video games that we're dealing with for modern games are usually composed of large amounts of people. And rare is it that, for better or worse, or maybe better and worse, rare is it that one person has that much influence, or even 3 people for that matter. And often, especially if it's the heads of certain places, they usually had a lot less input into the process than the people who were actually, making the music, doing the level design, putting together the graphics. And especially this late in the process, I wonder if I don't suspect it'll impact it that much.
My stance is this, right? We've seen a lot of this in the games industry over the years. We've seen Hideo Kojima leave or be ousted. We've seen Vince Zampella leave after working on Call of Duty and running Infinity Ward. Ultimately, these studios, like you said, are made up of so many moving parts that the game will go on, the show will go on. Not to say that those people's contributions were not super important and that they didn't make some of the best versions of the series or the IPs that they worked on, but ultimately these companies will find a way to tread on. It'll come down to how the fan base feels about these people. As a player, you may not be familiar with them, but the Subnautica community may rally behind them and say, hey, I'm not going to play this, or I'm going to play this, but I'm going to review bomb. And we don't advocate for that type of behavior. But I feel like a lot of times the vision of a game, not just in terms of review scores, but in terms of the acclaim that it receives, is based on the way that the companies treat their employees, right? If there's crunch, if there's departures that were not wanted, if there's use of AI, right? Gamers often kind of turn their backs on companies as a result of these things. We talked about this last week with AI being used and not fully disclosed. And so if these 3 people are beloved by people who know them and play the game, it could affect the sales and it could affect other things.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, that's been my thoughts. Those are the news stories this week.
All right, well, now that we've taken a look at what's going on right now, let's take a little look into the past with some video game history. Mr. Nice Guy, there are just a couple of things I want to highlight for you as well as for everybody who's listening at home. A couple of important games. One, very important to me personally, and it is among my favorite games of all time, is a 2012 game released for the PC called Thomas Was Alone. Lom, have you played this one?
I haven't, but I've heard you talk about it, and I'm excited to hear you talk about it more.
It is a simple game. It couldn't possibly be more simple. It's a platformer. It's about rectangles jumping around up and to the left primarily in order to get to the goal. But it tells an incredibly amazing story along the way. It is a beloved game, nominated for some BAFTAs. And I think it is fair to say that above all, it is a game with heart that came to tell a story and succeeds. And Mr. Nice Guy, I don't mind admitting that this is a game that has brought a tear to my eye.
Really? I love it. I love it.
When a game can make you feel something powerful, then that is when it becomes real, I think, transformative art. and especially deserves a place in your library. And it won me over, and I'd absolutely encourage anyone everywhere to get their hands on it. And Mr. Nice Guy, as you may or may not know, there is a Steam sale going on.
There is. How much is it right now?
$4.99. That's 50% off. Normally it's $10.
It's a great price.
If there is anybody who hasn't played it, you should play it. Mr. Nice Guy, I might be sending you a gift copy on Steam. All right.
I might be excited.
Yeah, I might.
Dude, I got to tell you this
Please.
real quick. So, and I don't want to say the name of the gaming journalist, but I think Mac will know who I'm talking about. I just don't want to say it on the show. A good friend of mine is a pretty decently well-known gaming journalist. And as a kid, this person, friend of the family, gave me the opportunity to transcribe some tapes that he had done interviewing several big people in the gaming industry, like Miyamoto. I'm not. Have I told you about this before?
You have, but I love hearing about it. Please.
So Miyamoto, like Will Wright, like a lot of really, really big names. And I remember in one of the interviews, he asked one of the people, he said, "Do you ever think we'll get to the point where a video game could make you cry? Like, do you ever think we'll get to that point where a game can get you in the feels, like have so much emotion, not just graphically, but in the way it's put together?" And it's interesting to hear you say that about Thomas Was Alone, because we have reached and surpassed that point. I don't know that I've ever cried during a video game, but I know playing a game like The Last of Us for the first time and seeing what happened in that opening scene, you get the chills. And it's so cool to see that games are at that point now. So I appreciated you sharing that.
Yeah, no, and thanks for sharing that.
And the reason why is because 20 years ago, we weren't there, right? When he was asking that question 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was that I was doing this, probably 20 years ago, probably 25, we were not there. He asked the question, and now it's come full circle. Video games are making us cry.
As they should be. Well, let me tell you about another video game that made you cry for a completely different reason. Released in 1983 in the arcade, it's Dragon's Lair. A very, very difficult game. It was tears of anger and frustration, right? Mr. Nice Guy, have you played Dragon's Lair for the arcade?
Yeah, I've played it, and it's not my jam.
Yeah, it's QuickTime Event the game, right?
Yeah, it's not the best game.
No. Objectively not, but it was, shall we say, kind of groundbreaking. Not only because I want to say it cost like 50 cents, which at the time was pretty big deal. And it was pretty punishing, and you had to keep sinking those quarters. But it was a pretty big deal for a number of reasons. Technologically, especially because of its use of Laserdisc, which was an amazing technological accomplishment. Now, these Laserdiscs were based off of gramophone records, which for anybody who doesn't remember, because you're not old-timey like Mac here, there was an actual needle that moved through grooves on a record. You would cut a sound into a record with a needle, and then running the needle along that record with with an amplifier would reproduce the sound that had been recorded, because that needle would have bounced around, cut the groove, and would have, essentially inscribed the music. In theory, the laser discs would not degrade like a phonograph record would, as it continually had a needle being drug across it, because they would use a laser. Now, obviously, that's not exactly how it turned out, but that's conversation for another time. Although the laser discs didn't use a digital signal like we would see in compact discs, but an analog signal. The pits and the distances would generate the wavelength rather than just a yes-no binary like CDs. Now, Laserdiscs were an unsung hero of storage in their day. You could fit so much into these things. And Mr. Nice Guy, I'm going to ask you, how much do you think a Laserdisc would accommodate storage-wise in, megabytes, gigabytes, whatever? And I'm going to give you some quick helpful metrics, hopefully.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Because this is 1983, so most IBM computers in 1983 shipped with 10 megabytes of hard disk space.
And that was going to be my guess, but knowing that...
Hang on, but don't guess yet. I got one more for you. CDs were the digital replacement, essentially, of the Laserdisc in a lot of ways, and the CDs could hold about 600 megabytes of data. So, just some ideas, float some numbers out there. Now that I've thoroughly thrown you off the scent, Mr. Nice Guy, where are you thinking?
I don't even want to guess. So it's more than 10, but less than 600.
Possibly.
I mean, I was actually going to guess less than 10 and say 1.
Believe it or not, Laserdiscs, 3 gigabytes. Gigabytes.
Back then.
Back in the 80s, yes. An insane amount of storage for the time. Dragon's Lair itself was really just QuickTime Events, the game. It was the first time that they used Laserdiscs for a video game. And 3 gigabytes meant that all of those hand-drawn artworks, all of that stuff could be kept in pretty high resolution for the game itself. I actually have to admit I've never played it before, and I don't intend to, but I can appreciate from a distance how it was a technological accomplishment, at least.
Mac, I could tell Mac just glanced down at the chat and was like, what are they talking about? We got people talking about professional wrestling and being a luchador.
You say luchador and my ears perk up.
There you go, Nacho Libre. Let's keep things moving with a topic, or rather a segment we like to call Topic of the Week. Now, it's interesting because 99% of the time, Mac and I do not coordinate on these topics, on these news stories, because I want to get his authentic opinion in the moment he wants to get mine. This one is one where I actually think we're going to be on different sides of the fence.
Probably.
And so I wanted us to have an intelligent conversation without me coming in knowing fully.
I cannot promise intelligence coming from this side, but I can at least promise words.
I promise words as well. I promise they will be in English. So here's the story for the topic. This is from GameSpot.com, written by Olson Kunke. I hope I pronounced that right. Stop Killing Games, a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers, has been picking up speed recently. It recently hit 1 million signees on its European Citizens Initiative petition, the minimum amount it needs for the European Commission to officially respond to it. Now the EU Lobbying Association, Video Games Europe, has offered its own statement arguing against the Stop Killing Games movement. Mac, this is super interesting. I'm going to read this quote, and then if you could remind people of our experience with Stop Killing Games, I think that'd be important for us to disclose. Quote, "We appreciate the passion of our community, however, the decision to discontinue online services is a multifaceted, never taken lightly, and must be an option for companies when an online experience is no longer commercially viable," the statement reads on Video Game Europe's website. "We understand that it can be disappointing for players, but when it does happen, the industry ensures that players are given a fair notice of the prospective changes in compliance with local consumer protection laws." Mac, I don't want to read too much in terms of quotes, but to summarize, they are basically arguing that from a financial perspective, requiring companies to keep games online in perpetuity or for a certain amount of time would make video game making too expensive. That's the argument. And like, I'm sure you and I can agree or disagree with them, but think logically about why they are making that argument, right? And what all would go into it. So, Mac, if you don't mind sharing with the people our history with Stop Killing Games, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this argument that they're making.
Absolutely. Right when Stop Killing Games was announced, we did reach out to Ross Scott, the face of it. Although he is an American living in the European Union, he is not one of the representatives for Stop Killing Games, at least the initiative side of things, because he's not a European citizen. While he very much is a YouTuber who feels very passionate about trying to make sure that games don't disappear when the publisher doesn't want to support them anymore. This was him being the face of it, was certainly his sort of, he was reluctant to do it, but didn't see anybody else doing the work. So he started up the initiative with the help of the people who are actually going to be the reps for it, and making videos, sharing those sorts of... When it was announced, we had him on this very show back in April of 2024. I've certainly spent plenty of time during Legalese segments in previous shows updating on where we're at, how we're at, and things like that. So there's our necessary disclosure. That being said, that's the only connection we've got to Stop Killing Games.
Yeah, we're not best friends with him or anything, but we
okay, now hold on there. I think Ross is my best friend. How dare you?
He seemed like a very nice guy when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
Mac, in all seriousness, like what do you think about this? Like the idea that requiring games to be online forever and never be able to be shut down, or at least more stop killing, that it's going to be too expensive. Up front. Like, what do you think about that?
Oh man, I wish that wasn't such a very predictable half-truth, because that is expressly not what Stop Killing Games has ever asked for, and expressly does not ask for. So, like, I will just throw out there, right? These are the same kinds of people, PR spin people, who, let's not forget, when Epic had to pay $500 million to the FTC, they claimed that they chose to pay $500 million to show the video game industry the way forward. That was their spin. These folk are same kind of people, same kind of nonsense. So they do a lot of sort of fudging with things and saying, well, we can't possibly keep games online forever. Nobody ever asked for that. And, you know, I mean, it's pretty explicit that that's not the aim. Now, there are some other things that they say that in the statement that I think are also skirting the lines of misrepresentations, half-truths, and a couple outright full-on lies. But, you know, I don't think we should be surprised that nobody asked for that, nobody's arguing for that, and that they are, shall we say, tilting at windmills, as the statement goes. Now, if it isn't clear enough, Lom and I are absolutely on the opposite points on this.
We are on opposite.
Yeah, if you
We're
can't
opposite.
see the video for those dear listeners out there, we're definitely...
So here's my thing. I totally get where Mac is coming from, and I totally get where both sides of this argument are coming from. As a gamer, would I prefer that when I buy a game, I don't have to worry about how long the online portion is going to be available? Absolutely. But also, and I'm not saying that Mac is not a rational human being, but as myself being a rational human being, I also understand why that may not be feasible. And why, yes, it could make game making more expensive. If I know up front going in that I am going to be at the mercy of certain laws that require me to keep access to the game for a certain amount of time, I'm going to have to put more money into it up front to ensure that that happens. Or at least I'm going to have to set more money aside to ensure that the servers are paid for in the future. And that's part of what they say in the quote that I didn't read, but I did send it to Mac in advance. They basically said, you know, private servers are not always a viable option. You know, and so they are going to be required to keep the servers up. And we think about they are, Mac. And we think about servers being something that you just spend money on. There's also a good amount of maintenance that goes into it. And when they get knocked down,
they get up again.
You have to and they do that automatically? Does AI do that, or does a person have to go in and fix it? So it's not just a matter of paying for the space. It's a matter of paying someone to continually maintain something that may be obsolete to everyone except for 2 or 3 people. And that takes resources away from your future effort.
Which is why it's a good reason that Stop Killing Games does not ask. And they have said that this will require them to keep servers up in perpetuity, and it won't. And nobody's asking for that. They're tilting at windmills. The request is that if you sold somebody a product, if you sold them a game, that when you decide you're no longer going to keep it going, that you need to make an end-of-life plan for the game so that it can still be reasonably functional. The exact requirements are not yet established for what reasonably functional means, but that it be left in a reasonably functional state when you decide to no longer support it. So that could mean people running their own private servers, like we used to do all the time in online-enabled games back in the 2000s and pre-2010. Or it could mean just releasing it so that only the single player is available for it, but that the game has something about it that is still functional. But nobody is asking. As a matter of fact, long before these guys made their statement, long before Embracer, EA, Epic, Nintendo, Riot, Sony, Square Enix, Ubisoft, Tencent, Microsoft, Netflix. These are the people who have signed on to this, the companies that have signed on to this to this statement from the lobbying group. Long before these people wrote their statement to say, you can't expect us to support things forever, Stop Killing Games had said, we're not asking anybody to support a game forever. That's not the ask. So for them to be like, we couldn't possibly, it would be too much, it would do things. It's just like, yeah, we didn't ask you to do that, dudes. Chill.
It's very easy to counter the 2 points that you just made. Extremely easy.
Sure.
Number one, the article that I just read to you,
yes.
in the article I just read to you, they said that private servers are not always viable.
Okay.
And the example you just gave of keeping the game going is using private servers. And they just said that's not always viable.
An option. And just because it's not always
But it's not
viable,
always viable, though.
And?
So it's an option, but it may not be.
Yeah.
Right? It may not be viable. That's what they said.
And that's the
second
reason
thing,
why the initiative never asked for there to be left in a very specific way. Some reasonable method of a reasonable product is still a worthwhile thing to go to. Now, also...
No, hold on, because I was going to say the second point, which counters exactly what you just said, which is that some games are designed to be online only. And so the idea of making a viable product out of an online-only game when the online is no longer available is just not feasible. Now, for a game that's single-player and multiplayer, absolutely. But for an online-only game, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how they could make that viable.
Oh, dude.
Post-online access.
I'm not a game dev, and I recognize where the end of my expertise is. But also, I am somebody who does read things and not, just read spin. Not that I'm saying this about you. I'm not saying this about you. I'm not saying this about anybody else.
You're good, bro.
But I am saying that it is these people's job to specifically obfuscate and make their position look as reasonable as possible, when in fact, I don't believe it to be as reasonable as they want us to believe. But one of the things that I do know is that laws, especially these Citizens Initiative, the thing that they're putting in here, Stop Killing Games, is not meant to be retroactive in the first place. The request also isn't that you are going to have to make every live service game functional now. It's for every future game released. So the idea is that they can figure out how to make those things work and then sunset it. The cost won't be in the last, and this is one of the things that they do claim in their statement. They're like, it's going to take money away from our future games that we're now going to have to put into past games to make them compliant.
Yes.
But that is, again, a deliberate mischaracterization because the law isn't supposed to apply to already released games, just future created games that you would need to do that, which is you can price into the game. Sony is not going to be required to suddenly make Concord work again.
Right.
But the next live service title, which, now, Lom, I'm not being crazy here. This is expressly what they said. They said it'll take away from our future ability to make games if we have to repair the past. Again, another thing that nobody asked for, but they do expressly state that in the full statement. And they do a lot of that. They do a lot of saying things that nobody asked for that furthermore are expressly said, we are not asking for, nor could this legally be a requirement because these laws can't work retroactively. And so for them to say those is, again, deliberate
But at the same time,
obfuscation.
Mac, they are correct that it could potentially make future games more expensive.
Possibly.
And all of the things that they wouldn't be able to do in the to go back and fix past games, they'd be required to do in future games, which would take away from their future ability to make games.
I think it's kind of interesting because we kind of touched on this a few episodes back. The idea of potential future harm versus certain current harm and whether one thing is weightier than the other. And then earlier in this episode, touching on the idea of if a business model is sustainable or not.
Right.
If a business model was unsustainable in video games, like let's say that live service games was just an unsustainable model, an always on, a Fortnite, something like that. If that model is unsustainable, should we be going hard to bat for a model that is unsustainable potentially? I don't know. But I do know that these guys are saying several things that are absolute lies at worst and misrepresentations at best. And there are just, a couple things to take what they say about how any additional responsibility on them as a publisher would destroy the industry might be a little overstating the harms.
I don't know that they said that any additional responsibility. I think that they were a little bit more specific than that in terms of the responsibility that they'd be asked to take on. I do want to read what people are saying in the chat. So AlexMan47, studios should see that live service games are not popular and those games die when the service closes. Sadly, some live service games have that paywall entry. I feel that more games don't need that online multiplayer. Studios close down games due to money. The money cow is dead. I'm not sure what he meant there, but I get what the direction you're going, Alex. I understand. They kept following the Fortnite pie and failed at it. Dude, I don't know that live service games are not popular. I don't know if I'd fully agree. I mean, people are still playing Destiny 2. Like World of Warcraft, people are still really, really into that game.
People are still paying and supporting EverQuest, which is one of the longest running live service games that have ever been. Although I will say, just for Alex Man's thing, I mean, I bought Halo Infinite and played the single player, thought it was fantastic, and was grateful for the chance. Did not play the multiplayer, nor do I think I'm really gonna, but I'm glad that it exists. And if Halo Infinite were to go down tomorrow, I would hope that I could still hang on to the single player campaign, even if I couldn't have the multiplayer.
And that's interesting you bring that up as an example, because Halo Infinite is free to play, the multiplayer, and the multiplayer part. And so like that brings up another thing that we probably don't have time to dive into, which is, what if there is no purchase involved? Right? Alex Man references the paywall. So what if there's no purchase?
Stop Killing Games does actually expressly state that for no purchase.
What do they say?
They say, we're not asking for games without a purchase to fall under this. This is purely for video games that you took our money and then you want to walk away and leave us with nothing.
Yeah, and so once again, that's not specific enough, because even though there's no purchase for the base game, what is there, Mac? How do you think they're making money? Not just from people purchasing the single player, but from, use your imagination, battle passes, skins, right? And so at that point, a purchase has been made.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a gray area that I think a lot of devs would be wary of.
You are right. There is stuff in there about microtransactions, but we don't have time for that.
And Galvatron says, in reference to this, not going to happen. There is no incentive for the industry to comply with any of their demands, because they know that all the signees on the petition will never stop buying games. Those people will never punish the industry for its malfeasance and bad.
Galvatron.
Pessimist as always. We love
you, buddy. Unlike the United States where we live, consumer protection law in the European Union does actually have teeth, which I think is one of the reasons why these guys are disingenuous.
I disagree. I think that they're being very realistic here. And they're looking to the future. This is the last thing I'll say, and then Mac, if you want the last word, it's all yours. I am very, very capable of being on one side of an argument, but also not seeing the feasibility of the side that I'm on, right? Not everything is black and white. I too would love to be able to have any game going forward, because we've established this is about the future, that I purchase, and knowing that, if I want to pop this game in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, show it to my kids, show it to my grandkids someday, I can do that.
Give them the Max Nephews Mega Man 2 treatment.
Right, but I also understand that with the way that games have evolved, and it's interesting you use that as an analogy, because we've come so far from the NES, right? We're not in an era anymore where you own a cartridge and there's no updates and you own everything. We now are in an online era with updates, with patches, with servers. And I just understand why these devs are saying it's not feasible for them to comply to these requests. And that's fine.
To be clear, I think it's the publishers. I don't know if there's a single dev on that list. I think there are tons of publishers. And from the few words that we do have from developers, most developers, with one, maybe two notable exceptions, have said that it's not an ask that is beyond their capability, that is a technical challenge, or would even cost that much. The publishers say it would. The devs have said, by and far, that it wouldn't. And so I think that's also a bit of hiding the ball that the publisher statement, the lobbying group, has done.
We will have to wait and see who wins.
We will have to. Lovely. Mr. Nice Guy, let's go look for a plucky young upstart on Kickstarter. Maybe a project that's trying to get off the ground. We call it Kick or Kickstart.
Let's do it.
I have posted a link in the chat so that we all can take a look. This is a little project called Team Crafter, which is halfway to its $70,000 goal for this. The minimum buy-in for a copy of this game is 20 euros, which translates over to 24 US dollars. The release date is looking for Q3 2026, where the people who buy on the Kickstarter will get themselves a copy in early access. So that'll get you your early access copy. Now, this game, you basically have a team of adventurers who will be going into battle, but you are not the adventurers, Mr. Nice Guy. You're the crafter, the person who makes it. You're the support staff. So you are going to spend your time going through portals, gathering supplies, and taking those back to base to craft, and giving those crafted items, those buffs and such, to the adventurers so that they can go off and defeat the creatures. Now, this does have the added bonus of a little bit of what looks like auto-battling from the stuff that you give to them, so that you can maybe address, like, each time around they're going to have different enemies that they're going to fight, give you an idea to know, like, what sort of weaknesses your team has and what kind of specific crafting you can build toward. Now, the feel of the gathering and the crafting, at least the gathering side, very much puts me in mind of the Mines of Stardew Valley.
Yep.
As for the development team, though, Mr. Nice Guy, it's an 8-member team that shares a connection through Final Fantasy XIV, of all things. So, FF14, it's an MMORPG that has a crafting as a bit of the game that I'm given to understand the mechanic is a little bit obscure. And so these folks know each other from having built a crafting simulator for Final Fantasy XIV.
Interesting.
So that you could, like, be like, oh, okay, so I've got this many of this and this many of this, and you could essentially use their program to see what sort of crafting you could do with the things that you have, or like what the probabilities or likelihoods would have after they had data mined the information from Final Fantasy XIV in order to give this sort of crafting assistant. They worked together great working on that and wanted a game more about just straight up their favorite thing, which was crafting. And
Love
that's
it.
how we get Team Crafter. So I love to see something that's born out of a bit of a passion for a hobby horse. But yeah, so that's Team Crafter. Mr. Nice Guy, what are you thinking?
So this is coming from the perspective, and this is cool, Mac. I like that you shared this. The perspective of someone who just cannot get into crafting games.
Mm-hmm.
I have tried Valheim. I have tried Project Zomboid.
Mm-hmm.
And this is after, like, watching these games on YouTube for a long time.
Mr. Nice Guy has tried, everybody. So
Yeah,
I will not
I've
hear
really
anybody besmirch his good name. The man has tried.
I've tried, and I've even hopped on a session probably a couple months ago with good friend of the show Ishmobile and played some Project Zomboid with him and some others, and it's fun with friends. Like, that's a different experience, but I just can't get into these. Now, that said, the thing that I really like about this Kickstarter is that it's streamlined, and you said it really well, Mac, when you said the idea of them just making a game about something that they are really, really into, which is crafting, and having that be the main focus, even though it says that this is a roguelite. To me, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we see Kickstarters and people are trying to make something that will appeal to the masses when maybe it's not a particular genre that they are really passionate about.
Sometimes people try and reach everybody.
Right.
Maybe sometimes you go for your niche.
That's exactly right. And it's funny. I went to go see, I think I told you I went to go see Daniel Tosh a couple weeks ago, the comedian, and he told this joke and like only a couple people laughed at one point. And he's like, oh, this is my goal, is to whittle it down so that only 2 of you are laughing, right? Like he wants the jokes to appeal. And so anyway, this game is the same thing. I think they want more than 2 people to buy the game, but I think that they're aimed at a very specific audience, and I really like that. Watching the video, the graphics remind me of, I can't remember the name of the game right now. It'll come to me later. but the battle screen
Mhm.
to me looks like it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, the battle screen looks a lot more like Slay the Spire.
Yes. And what's that indie game where you're kind of like dropped in the middle of nowhere? It's a pixel game and there's like no explanation.
Oh, are you thinking about Dwarf Fortress?
No, it's on my wish list. That's way too broad of an explanation. But anyway,
But could you imagine if I had gotten it from that explanation?
that would have been crazy. That would have meant we're really, really in sync, which we are. So vote for
Yeah.
us in the podcast awards. But anyway, Mac, this looks great. I'm excited for this.
Samesies. Now, 20 euros, 24 US dollars is a little bit high for a game from a studio that we haven't seen anything before. But if you're on the fence about something like this, I've got great news for you. They have a playable demo, so you don't have to leave it completely to chance. You can try it out. You can see if it is for you, and if it is, you can back it. Like I said, they're about halfway to their $70,000 goal, and they still have 29 days left to go on that. So, time for you to try it, look into it, see if it's for you, and go from there. But preliminarily, Mr. Nice Guy, we always have to say whether it's a kickstart or a kick it out of here, and I'll have to say it's a kickstart for me. I think it has promise. I like what they're doing, and even though I do think there are a few things, and I feel like the movement on the main character is a little sluggish for my taste. I feel like he doesn't run fast enough, but nonetheless, I think it's worth trying out. Kickstart for me.
Nice. And I feel the same way. I always want to get into one of these games, and there's so many that are so popular. Maybe this will be the one that changes my opinion. But more importantly, I think this is well put together, and I like that it's a passion project. Very clear. So best of luck.
All right. Well, that has been Kicker Kickstart.
Nice. Well, now it is time for Nerd Flex.
Ooh.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you do not. If you're here live, you have a job to do. People have been super shy lately, but I think we have some questions that are going to come in. As a reminder, the way this works, you ask us a multiple choice gaming related question. Mac and I use nothing but our noggins to try to answer said question. And if we answer it correctly, then it means we got it right. That's all it means. It means nothing else. Just that we got it right and we
Indeed.
worked through it. So, like I said, if you're here live, please get those questions in the chat, or we will hop onto the test bank. The good news is we have a question that just came in from AlexMan47, who asks, how old was the Oregon Trail series when Oregon Trail 2 released on the Windows 95-98 computers? A, 4 years old, B, 14 years old, C, 24 years old, or D, 34 years old.
Okay. So, technically speaking, I know that the Oregon Trail came out on mainframe computers, which would have been the 1970s. Windows 95/98, we're talking those years, 1995 to 98. So 70 to 95, closest match, C, 24 years.
I would agree. Nice. I like that. See, and we just use what some would refer to as deductive reasoning. I don't know if that's the right term for this, to answer these questions. But yeah, C, final answer. Let's see what Alex Man says in the chat. For others who are here, if you want to get a question in, let us know. Mac, would you mind reading that answer?
Absolutely. Says C, the original Oregon Trail series began with the original game created in 71 by Don Ratswitch, Bill Heinemann, and Paul Dillenberger for the HP 2100 microcomputer. This marks the starting point of the series. Oregon Trail 2 was released in 95 for Windows 95-98 and Macintosh systems. That leads us to the calculation for 24 years. And I smell a robot.
Yeah, where did you get that question? I feel like he probably used AI, right? Does that mean that the question's disqualified? I have no problem with AI in some regards.
I have a story about that for after the show, but I say
Nice.
let's carry on.
Let's keep it moving. Mac, we got a really, really good, really, what I think is tough question from our test bank. It's a Pokemon question. Gira Farig and Ho-Oh are 2 of 4 palindromic Pokemon names. Who are the other 2? This is a great question. Do you understand what that means? I do. But should we explain it for the people?
For the people at home, a palindrome is a sentence or a word that's spelled the same way frontwards as it is backward. Hannah, Hannah. You can flip that forward, backward. It'd be
Dad, mom.
too hot to hoot. There's a bunch of sentences and things that you can flip around. But I cannot think of even one single palindromic Pokemon name. Period. Even the ones two that you just barely named, they've already fluttered out of my head.
I've never heard of those.
Oh well, I've heard of Ho-Oh, but it would have never occurred to me.
Okay. Well, hey, you know what? This is one where we can't even guess because
I would like to phone a friend, our resident Pokemaster, Spennis the Menace, who is
Where's
not
he
here
at?
with us. Yeah, where are you, Spennis? We need you.
I should call him right now. He just went to the, I think it's Southern Fried Game Fest in Atlanta. I think he had a good time.
Well, I hope he's
But
having
anyways,
a great time.
let's just see what the answer is. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, dude, one of them we should have gotten. So one of them is Eevee.
Oh, see, now that you say it, it makes perfect sense.
And the other one is Alamamola.
Yeah, no, that must be some of that Gen 4 nonsense.
Now, Mac, here's a random question while we wait for another question to come in from the chat. What can Eevee evolve into? 3 different things, right? If I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, you could do Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon back in the old ones, but then they added Espeon and Umbreon, and then there were a couple more Eeveelutions that later came around. But I kind of stopped around Gen 4 personally.
Yeah, I don't play much either anymore. Mac, would you read that last question for us?
Absolutely. This question, again, from AlexMan47. We've got, in The Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom, how many echoes can you collect? A, 153, B, 127, C,
I think he meant to say 100.
yeah, I think so, 100, or D, 59. The thing is, I've not played Echoes of Wisdom, so I don't have any frame of reference.
Me either, but I'm trying to think like back to Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember how many of those little tombs there were that you could go through and do the puzzles. Nintendo really likes to put a lot of those types of things into their games.
Yeah, and they like odd numbered numbers.
They
like
do.
their Korok seeds, there were tons of them. So
Yeah.
I'm personally leaning toward A or B.
I was leaning towards B just because I think
Yeah.
that 153 is a lot. I mean, so is 127, but I think 127 is a Nintendo type of number.
I will go with you on that. B, final answer. Alex Man, let us know.
Hey,
B,
we did it.
127. Nice. Well, Mr. Nice Guy, feeling pretty good about these nerdy muscles of ours.
Feeling pretty good, and that has been Nerdflex for the
All right. Now, normally we would turn to a little bit of legalese.
legalese.
But we did the legalese and the topic all at once. So before we call our show, Mr. Nice Guy, we always like to share the cool, nerdy things that we are into. And we'd love for you who are here with us live to share as well. Mr. Nice Guy, what you been playing? What you been watching?
Dude, so I've been playing a good amount of stuff. 2 things I'll talk about. The Steam sale is going on, and I recently picked up a game called Suits for Hire on Steam. And it's a really, really good, simple game. You can pick it up for like $9 right now. You can play in third person, you could play in top down, and you're basically going around like John Wick, shooting people, doing some melee combat, and it's just a really great game that works on the Steam Deck, and I'm having a blast with it. And there's a ton of content, and I can tell because some of these levels are taking me like 40 minutes to beat on the second hardest difficulty. So I just have a lot more to unlock, and I'm having a blast with it. It's a nice pick up and play type of game. And then I'm trying to get my sons into Warzone so we can do squads. And for the sake of time, that's what I've been playing. In terms of watching, we're still doing Marvel Watch Through. We recently watched whatever the Spider-Man is that has all 3 of them in there.
No Way
spoiler
Home.
alert. No Way Home, that one. And almost done with the Detroiters. And that's it. Mac, what about you? Oh, chat, by the way, chat, what are we doing?
Yeah.
If you're here live, you got to let us know what you've been watching and playing and what you've picked up in the Steam sale, if you've picked up anything. Mac, what have you been into, buddy?
Dude, I have mostly been playing a kind of puzzle game called Baba Is You.
Yes.
Also had to pitch in and help the nephews on Mega Man 2, so played a little bit of that. And then I picked up another game from Hazelight Studios. They did It Takes Two. I picked up what was it? A Way Out. It was their game before that. And I've been playing that with my friend who, we get together on the weekends and we'll play a co-op game. He's the one with whom I played Halo Infinite. Had a great time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I've been playing. As for watching, not too frightfully much, honestly. Just watch that Taskmaster to fall asleep to, mostly. And yeah, that's about it. Now, I see that Alex Man is playing Cities Skylines, Splatoon 3, Mario Kart World, and World Quest on the Quest 3, apparently.
A little bit of shyness in the chat, and that's totally okay. If you don't want to tell us what you're watching and playing, no judgment.
We just won't know what to try out next.
We won't. Mac, I got to ask you this. Anything you're thinking of picking up in the Steam sale before it ends?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to gift a copy of Thomas Was Alone.
Dude, you really don't have to, but I appreciate it. You know what game I've been thinking about playing?
What
and
have you
I've
been
never
thinking?
gotten into? A cozy game that you're a big fan of where you're farming.
Stardew?
Yes. It's always one that's on my list. I'm like, I gotta just give this a shot. Maybe it'll help me like sleep if I ever can't sleep, which doesn't really happen. I'm out like a rock. But it seems like it's such a cozy game that I would just be able to turn my brain off and just farm stuff for no reason. And it's like $7.
Mm-hmm.
But I always think I'm not gonna like it. And so I never pick it up, but I should.
I think you should. Mr. Nice Guy, can I take us out?
Yeah, do it, buddy.
Thank you, everybody, for coming around to episode 348. It has been fantastic having you here. And remember, if you're thinking about who to vote for in the Podcast Awards, remember, for us, for the overall People's Choice, Best Black Hosted, and Games and Hobbies, voting open until the end of July, but do not leave it all the way until then. Thank you for being here, for your questions, for your comments, just for your positive energy. We appreciate you, and until we see you next Monday at approximately 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central on twitch.tv/2nerdsofthepod, we hope that you are excellent to everybody who crosses your path, and you keep it nerdy, y'all. Bye.
Be kind. Love y'all.